Hello and welcome to our last lesson in our matrices unit. Today we're going to look at solving 3x3 systems with matrices and then with the Desmos calculator. So this is going to be our lesson 38, Algebra 2, second semester. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. Here's our first example. It says perform each matrix row operation and write the new matrix. So when it says this, what it wants us to do is perform these operations and then put our new answers in for row 3 and then perform these operations and put the new answer in for row 4. Now R1 is going to be our row 1. So first we are going to multiply everything in row 1 by -2, then add those numbers to the corresponding element in row 3. So let's do that first. So I've got 2, 0, 3, 5, and 9. Oh, sorry, row 1, I've got 1, 1, 1, -1, and 2. So I'm going to go ahead and say -2 times 1. So that's going to be -2. Then I will add it to the first element in row 3, which is 2. And then I'm going to say -2 times 1, which is -2 plus 0. And then I'm going to say -2 times 1, which is -2 plus 3. And then I'm going to say -2 times -1, which is going to be +2 plus 5. And then -2 times 2 is -4 plus 9. Okay, so that means our new row 3 after doing these operations to it is going to be 0, -2. This is a 3, so that's going to be 1, 7, and 5. Okay, so that'll be our new row 3. Our row 4, we want to do -6 times everything in row 1. Now, here's why we are doing this. We are doing this because whenever we start solving a system of equations with matrices, what we want to end up with is first a 1 as our first element, and then zeros all underneath it. And then we're going to want to have 1s in the diagonal. Okay, so we're going to do more of this as we go along, but this is just kind of the beginning of doing that. Okay, trying to figure out, okay, how can I get a 0 here? How can I get a 0 here? So in order to get a 0 here, I need the inverse of 6. Okay, so I can multiply 1 by -6 to get -6, which is the inverse of 6, which would then get me 0. So see, -6 times row 1. So -6 times 1 is -6. And then we're going to add the corresponding element in row 4, which is +6. And then I'm going to say -6 times 1 is -6 plus 4. -6 times 1 is -6 plus 3. -6 times -1 is going to be +6 plus -7. And then last we'll have -6 times 2 is going to be -12 plus 5. So now my new row 4 is going to be 0, -2, -3, -1, and -7. Okay, so that's how we're going to do one like that. Now, let's continue. So here it says a few steps in the process of simplifying the given matrix to row echelon form with 1s down the diagonal from upper left to lower right and zeros below the 1s is shown. Fill in the missing numbers in the steps that are shown. Okay, so this is our original matrix, okay? And what we want to do is go from here to here, noticing that I've got zeros below that first one. So what we're going to do is figure out what do I need to do, what operation needs to be done in order to get a 0 first for my row 2, okay? So I need to find the inverse of 2, okay, which is negative 2, right? So I need to multiply everything in row 1 by negative 2, and then I will add it to row 2. So we don't want the red marker. So then that's going to be my first step, is to say negative 2 times row 1 plus row 2. And then my second will be to say, okay, what is the inverse of 3? And so that would be negative 3, right, to get 0. So then I want to multiply everything in row 1 by negative 3. And then we will add that to row 3 to get our new row 3 with a 0 in the beginning. See, like this. So let's go ahead and find, okay, what's going to be the missing answer here and here, okay? Negative 2 times 1, start here. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, plus 2 is 0. Negative 2 times negative 1 is positive 2, plus negative 5 is negative 3. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, plus negative 2 is going to be negative 8. So right here, I don't think I can write that small. So then our first one is going to be negative 8. So we'll say 0, negative 3, negative 8. Negative 7 times negative 2 is positive 14, plus 4 is positive 18. Okay, so that's going to fill in this row. And now let's fill in that third row. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, plus 3 is 0. Negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3, plus 2 is 5. Okay, I guess I'll write those here. 0, oops, sorry, 5, okay. Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9, plus negative 8. So negative 9 plus negative 8 is negative 17. Negative 3 times negative 7 is positive 21. 21 plus 40 is 61. Okay, so that's going to fill in these 4 spaces here. Now, how do we go from this to this? Well, notice our change here is the 1. They're trying to get this negative 3 to be 1. So in order to do that, okay, I'm not looking for 0 here. I'm looking for 1. That means I'm going to need to multiply. What can I multiply by negative 3 to get negative 1? Okay, well, I know that I can multiply a number by its reciprocal, which remember is just the flip of the fraction, and get 1. But I need it to be positive 1. This is a negative 3, so I'm going to multiply this row 2 by its, here's my new row 2, by its negative reciprocal, the negative reciprocal of negative 3, which is going to be negative 1/3. So I'm going to do negative 1/3 times row 2. So negative 1/3 times 0 is 0. That's where you get that. Negative 1/3 times negative 3 is positive 1. So they already have that written there. Negative 1/3 times negative 8 is going to be a positive 8/3. So right here would be positive 8/3. Okay. And then negative 1/3 times positive 18 is negative 6. So then negative 6 would be here in this spot. And then notice on the bottom we've got 0, 5, 0, 5. So we're going to keep the negative 17, 61. They didn't do anything. They haven't changed it yet. Okay. Now we're going to go from here, this step, onto solving a whole system of equations using matrices. Okay, so it says solve the system of equations for x, y, and z using the Desmos calculator. So we're going to do that at the end. First, I'm going to show you how to do it with matrices, just because I want you to see how we would do that. Okay, so what we want to do first is we learned how to go from equation form to augmented matrix form in one of our lessons in the past. And so the way we did that is we look at the coefficients. Coefficient of, in this first equation is 1, 1, negative 1, 1, 1, negative 1, and the answer to the first equation is negative 2. On our second equation, we're going to have 3, negative 1, and 1. 3, negative 1, 1, and the answer is 10. And then that last equation, negative 1, 5, negative 4, 1. Negative 1, 5, negative 4, 1. Okay, so this is our augmented matrix, okay? Now what we want to do is we want to get these two numbers to be zeros, okay? So the way we're going to do that is just like we did on that last slide, where we figured out, okay, first let's look at row 2. What can I multiply row 1 by, row 1, column 1, this element, by in order to add it to 3 and get 0? Well, I need its additive inverse, right? So since this is a positive 3, we want this to be negative 3. So that means I need to multiply this by negative 3, but then that means I'll multiply everything through by negative 3. So then what that's going to do is I'm going to keep that first row, 1, 1, negative 1, negative 2. And then for this second row, I'm going to say negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, plus 3 is 0. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, plus negative 1 is negative 4. Negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3, plus 1 is 4. Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, plus 10 is 16. So that's my new row 2. Now let's figure out what do I need to do to row 1 or what is the additive inverse of negative 1? Well, the additive inverse would be positive 1, right? So I need to multiply 1 by 1 to get to where I can add it to negative 1 and get 0. So then this is going to be 0, because 1 times 1 is 1, minus 1 is 0. 1 times 1 is 1, plus 5 is 6. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, plus negative 4 is negative 5. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2, plus 1 is negative 1. Okay, now I want this to be a 1, okay? So I need to think, what could I multiply negative 4 by to get a positive 1? Well, that's going to be its multiplicative inverse, which is going to be negative 1/4. So now I'm going to multiply everything in row 2 by negative 1/4. I'm going to keep row 1 like it is. 1, 1, negative 1. And the answer is negative 2. Now for row 2, I want to multiply everything through by negative 1/4. So 0 times negative 1/4 is 0. Negative 4 times negative 1/4 is 1, which is what I wanted. 4 times negative 1/4 is negative 1. 16 times negative 1/4 is negative 4. And then now this last row, we want to make this a 0, this 6 a 0. Here, let's just go ahead and write it, and then I'll change it here. to the right of it. Okay, so we want this 6 to be a 0, so once again we're going to find the additive inverse, okay? But this time we're just going to use row 2. So I want to multiply 1 by negative 6, so that negative 6 plus 6 is 0, right? So my first row stays the same, it does not change. My second row stays the same now that I've changed with my new changes. And now my last row starts with a 0. I need to multiply row 2 by negative 6. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. Negative 6 times negative 1 is positive 6. Positive 6 plus negative 5, or 6 minus 5, is 1. And then negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24. Minus 1 is 23. Now, what's great about this is, look, we've got zeros under the first two columns, and ones in diagonal. So that means this is the correct form we need. Okay. So what we would want to do next is, remember, this is x, y, and z. Okay, so notice here I've got z equals 23 because x and y now have a coefficient of 0. So that's why we did that. And so I can say, oh, okay, z equals 23. Now I can substitute that 23 in for my this equation, because this is going to say y minus z equals negative 4. Y minus z equals negative 4. And I can now substitute 23 in for z, because now I know 23 is z. So instead of saying z, I could say y minus 23 equals negative 4. Which is, when I add 23 to both sides, I'm going to see that y is 19. Okay, and then I can substitute, now I can substitute y and z in for this top equation, x, which is x plus y minus z equals negative 2. See, it's going to stay the same all the way through. So then x plus 19 minus 23 is going to equal negative 2. And then when I solve, I'll see 19 minus 23 is negative 4. Add the 4 to both sides, so x would equal 2. Okay? So then 2, 19, and 23. So that's how we can solve a set of that's how we can solve a system of equations using matrices, which I think is the fun way, because I think it's like a big puzzle. But I am going to also show you how we can do this using the Desmos calculator real quick. So if I go to Desmos, you're going to see that I have already got the equations typed in. Okay. And so, but notice there's no graph. Okay. So the reason there's not a graph is because we don't have the computer doesn't understand what z is. So that's why it says add slider. So we'll just go ahead and add that slider. Now notice here, okay, I've got this, I've got these 3 lines. I need to see, where do they all cross? Okay, so that's what I'm going to use this slider for. So I'm going to move it. Notice how when I move the slider, it moves the equation, okay? I mean, it moves the graph, and this part is getting closer and closer together. It's hard to see right now, but it's all getting closer together. So we want to continue until it meets. Okay, well, we're like, oh wait, we can't go any further. We can. what we need to do here is we want to change our scale. So I'm going to say, I just need to make it bigger. Let's say -5 and 30. Okay. Now, let's keep zooming. Oh, sorry. So let's go back to our slider and keep moving it, keep moving it, keep moving it. It's getting closer and closer. I'm going to have to move my graph down. Keep going till they all three meet. We're getting close. Look at it. Okay. We're so close. Not quite though. We gotta make sure they're all three meeting. There we go. Okay, see how they all three meet? You want to zoom in? So this is going to be our answer. Okay, so my x is 2, my y is 19, and look, my z is 23. Okay, so that's how you can do it by graphing, and we're okay with you doing it by graphing. But if you want to challenge yourself, you can also do it with the matrices. Okay. Okay, so this one I'm just going to do by graphing. So let me go ahead and type it into Desmos real quick, and then I'll share that with you. So then once again, we'll add the slider. Okay. Okay, so just keep sliding until it looks like they've crossed. See, they still haven't all, they're still not all three crossed yet. It's getting closer though. We're super close now. Almost. Oops. There we go. See, they all cross. And so our answer will be x is -1, y is 7, and z is -1. Okay. All right. So that's all I have for today. And now you know what time it is. It is time to work. All right, if you guys have any questions, you need to go to a live lesson at 10 o'clock. And I hope you have a great day.